Hello students, today we will discuss about the joint classification. But before discussing about the joints and the classification, just have a recap of our previous class. In our previous class, we discussed about the parts of bone and the function of bone. We discussed that the bone is having diaphysis, epiphysis, metaphysis and epiphyseal plate of cartilage as its part. And we have discussed that a bone is support giving to the body, it gave shape to the body, it provide attachment for muscles and ligament, and it act as a lever of muscular action and manufacture blood cells and store body calcium and phosphorus. So these things we have discussed in our last class. So discuss about the joint. Joint is the link point between two or more bone or cartilage. It can be in between two bones, it can be between in bone or cartilage, it can be between two cartilage. The joint is supported or provide stability by the ligaments. The movement along joint is produced by muscle contraction. If a muscle contracts, then a joint is able to move or perform action on its axis. So in this picture, if we study with this picture, the yellow portion is the bone. And which part of bone? Yes, the epiphysis part of bone. We have discussed this earlier that this end part is the condylar end and called as the epiphysis. This epiphysis articular surface is covered with the articular cartilage. Articular cartilage covered the articular area of the epiphysis and provide a joint space in between. This articular cartilage provides frictionless movements and shock absorbing property to the joint. So this meeting junction of the two bones is called as joint. So here is the classification of joint. Joint can be classified in two broad ways. First of all, it is classified according to function, and second, more important, is called as the classification according to structure or shape. So in classification according to function, it is of three types: non-movable joints, slightly movable joints and freely movable joints. Non-movable joints are called as synarthrosis. Slightly movable joints are called as amphiarthrosis. Freely movable joints are synovial joints or called as diarthrosis. According to structure and shape, the fibrous joint, the cartilaginous joint and the synovial joint are the classification. Let's discuss in brief with all these joint types. Non-movable type, we have sutures, gomphoses and syndesmosis. They provide no movement at all. They are designed to allow growth of body. Slightly movable joint. In slightly movable joints, some degree of movement present in two bones or the joint. Example are the intervertebral disc between adjacent two vertebral columns. This is the first vertebral column and the second vertebral column, and in between there is a intervertebral disc. Manibruo-sternal joint in the manubrium and sternum. This is also this category of joint. Then third is synovial joint or the freely movable joint. These allow large range of movements, articular surface covered by hyaline cartilage, and their presence of joint cavity filled with synovial fluid and synovial membrane and capsule are the feature of these type of joints. According to structure or shape of the bone, the fibrous joint, cartilaginous joint and the synovial joint are the types of this classification. The fibrous joint. Fibrous joint are joint connected by fibrous tissue. These are fixed joint where bones are united by a layer of white fibrous tissue. In the skull, the joint between bones are called sutures, and this is the example of this type of fibrous joint. Cartilaginous tissue are connected entirely by cartilage. The joint between manubrium and sternum is an example. This type of joint also forms the growth region of the immature long bones, which is called as the epiphyseal plate of cartilage. Then next is synovial joint, which is very common and classified in many types. Synovial joint allow for smooth movement between the adjacent joint bones. The joint is surrounded by an articular capsule that defines a joint cavity filled with synovial fluid. The articulating surface of the bones are covered by a thin layer of articular cartilage. This is the peculiar type of synovial joint. The classification of the type of synovial joint, the first type is ball and socket, which is most mobile among all joints. Sphere is one bone fits into the cavity of another bone. Hip joint and the shoulder joint is the typical classical example. Hinge joint, move across these joints in one axis, like hinge movement of door or window. Elbow joint or knee joint is the example. Condylar joint, oval shaped condyle fits into a socket of another bone, allowing movement in one axis with some rotational movement in another axis. Temporomandibular joint or the small joint movements in IP joints is the example. Plane joints. Plane are the articular surface of flat and only minimal gliding movements are possible in this type of joint. And intercarpal or intertarsal, the joints of wrist and the ankle are the examples. Next is pivot joint. One bone is fixed to the another rotate and the another rotate around the fixed bone. The example is proximal and distal radio-ulnar joint, where the radius moves or rotate over the ulna and forms supination and pronation. Next is ellipsoid joint. Oval surface, male surface fits into reciprocal concave female surface to adjacent joint, allowing movement in two axes, and wrist joint, metacarpophalangeal joint, atlanto-occipital joint are the examples. Next is saddle joint. Both articular surfaces are reciprocally concave convex, and first metacarpophalangeal joint and sternoclavicular joint are the examples. And here are the reference for your help. I hope you found this video well for your knowledge. Thank you.